got till about 7:30, and so we're going to run quick, but let me begin, since I just didn't get the chance to do it, to point this out. Just about 8 years ago, a week before this man got inaugurated, Rowan University implemented a particular vision, a bold vision of a new place that would have a growing campus, a center that would bring together students from across the political spectrum, an academic institute that would inform, engage, and train everyone in all matters involving applied politics and advanced citizenry, and thus was created the Rowan Institute for Public Policy and Citizenship, RIPAC. I am Ben Dworkin, so I now get to introduce myself and say I'm Ben Dworkin. I am the distinct honor of being the director of RIPAC, and I just want to welcome all of you to an evening with Governor Bill Murphy. Thank you. I do want to just acknowledge some of the state elected officials here so that we can make sure that you know that they were here. Please join me in welcoming Senator Paul Moriarty. Assemblyman Bill Spearman. Assemblywoman Melinda Kane. And the Senate Majority Leader Luke Greenwald. Very briefly, and then I'll get to the first question for our fireside chat, Governor, but RIPAC didn't do this alone. We very generously had many co-sponsors from the university community, including the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies, the Rick Edelman College of Communication, Humanities, and Social Sciences, the Departments of History, Law and Justice Studies, Political Science and Economics, the Program in American Studies, and the Mortensen Honors College. Let's just give them a round of applause. Governor, we'll see what we can do here. We are fast approaching the conclusion of 2 historic terms, with you being our governor. Your legacy, as is often the case, will eventually be defined by historians, or, well, people like me. So let me begin with this. When the academics write the definitive book about the Murphy administration, what should the title be?
Reach for my microphone here. I'm dating myself, but I'm having a little bit of a Wayne Newton moment here. First of all, Ben, thank you for doing this. It means a lot. Ali, thank you for your leadership, partnership, your gracious words. Tony, same to you, to all the electeds. You heard a bunch of them. Nick Moustakis is here, Mayor of Mount Laurel. It means a lot. Lou and I go way, way, way back. In fact, we go back further than anyone else in public service in the state of New Jersey. And to him and Melinda and Paul and Bill, Dave Bailey was here earlier. Can't ignore Karen Elkis and Steve and Noah who were here. To all the faculty, staff, not just at RIPAC, but the entirety of Rowan University. Incredibly humbled to be back and especially thrilled to be with so many rockin' students. So thank you so much for having me. Really good memories here. We've done a lot together. So the name of the book?
What would be the book, the definitive work on the Murphy administration?
You ready for this? Somebody asked me about this earlier. Jersey, baby. Or in a less sort of pop culture way, this may get to answer a different question, Ben, but something to the effect, we are who we said we would be, or we were who we said we would be. In other words, I think a lot of folks in this line of business, none of the folks here, I might add to their enormous credit, but a lot of folks campaign on one basis and then govern on another. And we haven't done that. Whether people have liked what we've done or not is a separate matter, but we haven't hoodwinked them, we haven't bait and switched them, and I'm proud of that.
I want to take a moment now to just look back over these 8 years. Tonight's program, as I kind of indicated in my opening, is just particularly special to all of us involved with RIPAC, because literally RIPAC began 1 week before you were inaugurated. We have grown up together, sir. And we have had our ups and downs, as anybody would in their first 8 years. So what would you say, Governor, is your single biggest accomplishment as governor?
Oh, gosh. I should have also mentioned the Board of Trustees. I know we've got at least one or two folks here as well. I want to give them an acknowledgement. Biggest accomplishment, probably what I've already said, in the sense that we didn't fool anybody. Maybe put differently, we campaigned on the basis to build a stronger, fairer, more responsible New Jersey. And we've done a lot in all three of those lanes. Have we accomplished everything we want to accomplish? No. But we've accomplished a lot, and the journey has been in the direction that we intended it to. So stronger is jobs, investment, grow the economy. We have more people living in the state right now than ever before, more people employed than ever before, more businesses in operation than ever before. In fact, in the month of June, Bill Noonan is here from Choose New Jersey, and Bill's heard me say this 1,000 times. In the month of June, there's an office in our Secretary of State's lane that counts how many new businesses are applied to begin. And we set the all-time record in the month of June in New Jersey. Fairness is about addressing inequities, yawning inequities. Not entirely, but a lot of them, if not most of them, along racial lines. So shrinking those, whether it's criminal justice system, our clemency initiative, access to health care, access to education, affordable housing, whatever it might be. My wife's initiatives with great support from the legislature in infant and maternal health matters. And then responsible is, are we a state you can trust again? The credit rating agencies had downgraded us 11 times. In the prior administration, they've upgraded us 9 times. I'm proud of that. We made our full pension payment 5 consecutive years in a row.
So I think we're a state you can trust again. So that's a longer answer, but those are the 3 foundational legs of the stool, if you will, and I think we've made significant progress on all.
Obviously, you've been, as part of, in terms of your administration and pursuing a legislative agenda, some things were easy because there was pent-up demand for certain progressive legislation that you were able to do largely the first 6 months after you came in after a very conservative governor, Chris Christie. And there were some things that were much harder to push through and get across the goal line. To follow up on your proudest accomplishment, is there a particular law that you just feel, I'm really glad I was here to do that one?
By the way, Mike Delamato is with us. Mike was with us since day one, so he should probably answer this question as well. I think raising the minimum wage, particularly as we sit here today, the federal government's minimum wage is $7 and something, which is extraordinary. Multiply that times 40 hours a week, even times 2 heads of household, times 52 weeks, you're not even near the poverty line, which I think is shameful. It took us longer, Mark knows this, it took us longer to get it over the goal line, but we did get it over the goal line, and it's indexed now, and it's well over $15 an hour. There's a movement in America right now that we should take another quantum leap. I would be down for that if I were still governor for the next number of years. That would certainly be on the list. Millionaires tax, not to drive people out of the state, but or to be a class warrior, but to just ask folks to do their fair share. We've been able to take those proceeds and drive them into really meaningful programs in the middle class, largely. So those are a couple. Sure. There are many, but of the many hundreds, those are a couple I'd point out.
Obviously, not everything works. Not everything that you want to do is achieved. So let me ask you this. Governor, what was your biggest disappointment or regret from your time as governor?
Yeah, I'll give you one which is profound and another one which is really directed toward Washington. And I think eventually we'll dig out of the latter, but it won't be in my time. The profound one is early days of COVID. All of us, including public health officials, were in the dark trying to find the light switch. We forget this now, but there was a huge debate. Again, Michael, remember this. Are masks good or bad? Like, it's hard to believe we were debating that, but we were. Is it healthier to be outside or inside? Well, it's pretty darn clear. You should be, if outside's healthier than being inside. Or remember all of us putting on gloves to take the mail in from the mailbox and putting it on yesterday's newspaper and wondering how the heck. So when we lost, we lost 35,000 precious lives in this state. Could have lost a lot more for sure. Tell that to a family who lost a loved one, by the way. That doesn't really going to matter to them, nor should it. So that's early on, and I'm not alone in that one. All of us, bless you, we don't miss a thing up here. Speaking of it being indoors and passing,
maybe masks are
exactly.
still valuable.
Let's reach. We're going to give them out at the door on the way out. The one that I think is just plain wrong is the Trump administration pulling the plug, or at least freezing offshore wind. And we're in a big affordability crunch right now. I don't have to tell anybody that. And one of the big affordability challenges is your utility bill. And we have, again, with the legislators here and beyond, have done an enormous amount against that. But it's a tidal wave, and it's not just in New Jersey, but it certainly is in New Jersey. And a big reason is we've got a supply-demand imbalance, and that exists for a number of reasons. But the last thing you should be doing, I was an economics major, but I don't think you needed to be one to conclude, the last thing you need to be doing if you've got a supply-demand imbalance is taking 11.5 gigawatts of supply off the table. Never mind, by the way, a huge economic engine for South Jersey, a huge organized labor, building trades, source of jobs. It makes no sense at any level. People say, well, you retired a certain amount of generation. That's true. 2.7 gigawatts, about 2.4 of which was decided before I got into office. We forget with the Great Recession how slow the economy got, how low energy prices got, and therefore a lot of power generation sources were no longer economic. Never mind getting coal out of New Jersey, which never made any sense as an environmental matter. So 2.7 off the table. We were prepared to put 11.5 offshore wind, plus another 500 to 1,000 megawatts of solar. We've led the nation in solar. We now lead it in storage. To have that come off the table, again, I'm going to die trying through January 20th. We won't succeed through January 20th. But it's a little bit like Texas. If you're sitting on oil and gas reserves and you're the governor of Texas, putting aside environmental concerns, and obviously those are real, you're going to maximize the hand you've been dealt. That makes sense. If you're New Jersey and you're sitting on 140 miles of shore with, by the way, an underwater reality where it goes down and stays flat for 50 miles and you could put these suckers 35, 40 miles and you barely see them, and you create those jobs and you power 1.5 million homes with clean energy in New Jersey, that's the hand you play. So I hope at some point in Washington they come around on that.
You mentioned January 20th, which will be the inauguration of the state's 57th governor, Mikey Sherrill. That date is fast approaching. Right now, there are a handful of people still alive who sat behind the governor's desk and know truly what it means.
I hope I'm one of them.
Yes, but know truly what it means to have that awesome responsibility of being in charge of this state. What advice would you give to Governor-elect Sherrill?
By the way, on the being alive moment, I had a colonoscopy this morning. Yeah, exactly.
We knew this was going to be a revealing little discussion, but that was not where I thought we were going to go.
There were several moments in the past 24 hours where I didn't think I would make the alive governor list.
We're glad you made it,
Yeah,
sir.
I made it, barely. I'm not sure Mikey needs advice. First of all, I'm thrilled she won. You had two, yeah. And I know this is a nonpartisan entity that you run, and it's a nonpartisan gathering, but it was pretty clear you had two starkly different visions for where the state would be going. And I thought she did a great job. She is a rock star. Mike helped her a lot as well. Her lieutenant governor, Dale Caldwell, is a rock star. Look him up, keep an eye on him. She just announced he'll be her Secretary of State, as Tahisha Way is for me, and Tahisha has been Secretary of State since day one and has been outstanding. So I'm not sure she needs advice. We had dinner. She and her husband, Jason, and Tammy and I had dinner last week, and we shared a lot of personal advice on what's worked. They've got 4 kids. We've got 4 kids. You know, at a very personal level, this is what's worked for us. This is not, you know, this may not have worked. But her instincts are outstanding. She won, I think, first and foremost because of who she is, who Dale is, the vision they put forward. I think she also won because there are a lot of people out there who may not even be Democrats who said, you know what, this isn't the America I signed up for, and I'm going to do something about it. I think that contributed to her very wide victory margin. And there's a little bit of this where I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but there's a little bit of, hey, we generally like the way the state's headed. She's going to do things differently for sure, as she should. But in the broad arc of history, it feels like she's going to take the state in a similar direction that we've tried to take it over the past 8 years. And I think when you combine all 3 of those factors, that's why she won. And I'm available. We're full bore in the transition. You know this because you've lived it. The transition period is a race for her and her team. We are there, open book, open lines, open doors to help her in any way possible. I know the legislators are as well. Listen, no matter how good she is and how good they are, it's never easy when you step into something that's new. The good news is for her, she's an elected official, multi-term congresswoman, very successful. So unlike me, who I'm proud of my life story, but I had not been in elected office. And getting into that for the first time is a step. She's already taken that step in many regards. I think she's going to be great.
January 20th also means that you will technically be looking for a new job.
That's why I'm here tonight, by the way.
Two-part. I have no doubt we'd find a job for you. First, two-part question, sir. Do you imagine it's going to be a difficult transition from being governor to being a citizen? And second, following on what I'm sure will be some very much deserved rest, what do you want to do next?
On the former, the answer is yes. And I know that because I've done it before. I left a professional career, which was 1,000 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden, you stop. I was the United States ambassador to the Federal Republic of Germany, 1,000 miles an hour, and then you stop. This will be similar, if not even more intense. And those are at a personal level, those are challenging transitions that last, in my case, 6 months to a year. I think that's probably pretty typical. It's part of the reason I got as my birthday present for my wife several trips that we're going to go on, beginning that night, by the way. We're going to sneak out of town. So I don't underestimate. The only good news for me is I've done it before. I know what works, what doesn't work. And by the way, travel is a positive, which is why we're traveling. I don't know what's next. I'm not dodging the question. I literally don't know. We've left all options on the table. We've loved being in public service, ambassador, governor for sure. I was the finance chair for the Democratic National Committee, which was a full-time volunteer job for several years. All of that has been incredibly rewarding. I'll be shocked if we don't do something in the public service lane. I'm not sure that'll be a day job, if you will, but we're leaving all options open.
Okay. I began our discussion here by asking you about a book title. I just want to return to that theme. It's been said that during the height of the pandemic, you asked your senior staff to read The Splendid and the Vile by Erik Larson, which, for those who might not know, is an absolutely wonderful book about Winston Churchill during the bombing of London by the Nazis in World War II. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to ask you about those books that made a difference for you over the last 8 years. Specifically, are there 3 book titles? What 3 books made the biggest influence on your time as governor and that you might recommend for everyone else to read?
I will give you 3. Can one of them be The Splendid and the Vile?
Sure.
So the reason why this was so relevant, Erik Larson is a great writer. Let me back up and say, I'm not being a snob, but I only read nonfiction. I'm not sure why. My wife is overwhelmingly a fiction reader, an avid fiction reader. I am exclusively a nonfiction reader. I think a normal person should be more balanced. I'm not terribly balanced on that front. The Splendid and the Vile is by Erik Larson, who's an extraordinary nonfiction writer. He wrote a book about one of my predecessors in Berlin, the U.S. ambassador to Germany in the 1930s, called In the Garden of Beasts, which is another great Larson book. But The Splendid and the Vile, I read in the darkest days of COVID. So this is spring of 20. I also had just recovered from a cancer diagnosis and surgery, so I was looking for anything that would take my mind off of what was going on. And this was about how Winston Churchill kept the West together until the Americans finally got on board. I am gonna get a little political and make one comment. The interactions that our government has had with Russia as it relates to Ukraine, whose flag I have worn every single day since 3+ years ago, is shameful. And it so disrespects all the greatest generation in our country who fought and died for whether it was World War I or World War II or what Churchill stood for. It's disgusting. In any event, The Splendid and the Vile was an extraordinary analysis of leadership and Churchill's leadership and how he kept this thing together until help came in and I wouldn't say bailed him out, but fortified him. And when you think about spring, summer of 2020, all of us, not just me, all of us are in there, you know, in our own little way, waiting for testing for COVID to get approved, waiting for a vaccine to get approved, waiting for the infection curves to move on, a little bit of a similar. Second book, the best biography I think I've ever read. That wasn't a biography, it was about a period, but Churchill was the main, called Our Man by George Packer, about Richard or Dick Holbrook, who was a friend of ours, who was an extraordinary diplomat, worked from the Kennedy all the way through to the Obama administrations. Pretty incredible. If you've ever seen the movie Zelig or Forrest Gump, he keeps popping up in these frames. You'd say, wait a minute, how'd that work? An extraordinary guy, very flawed, but an extraordinary talent, but more importantly, in this case, a great book. My third one, I only finished a few months ago, a little bit of a different theme, Tonight in Jungle Land by Bill Noonan shaking his head, by Peter Carlin, and it is about the making of the Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band album Born to Run. That's relevant for me because it came out just between my senior year in high school and my first days in college. And it was incredibly meaningful work. It's obviously by a Jersey icon who we've gotten now to know over the years. And the book is a great book on how you put together one of the greatest albums of all time.
Thank you for sharing that.
Don't ask for a fourth.
I will not. I'll stop there. Look,
I might go to the Bible, and I'm literally not
when
kidding
in doubt, you're
you.
gonna...
Probably would be on the...
Governor, I am honored to teach a class here at Rowan University on New Jersey politics. And for the purposes, this is a setup for the question for you, obviously. For the purposes of that class, South Jersey is defined as anybody who watches Philadelphia TV. If you watch New York TV, you are North Jersey. I don't care where you are in the state. But if you get a New York TV, you're North Jersey. And if you're in one of those few places like Plainsboro where you kind of get both, that is Central Jersey. But that's just me. I understand it's a define. This is why I wanted to talk about South Jersey, because we often have our own challenges and opportunities in terms of the economy and infrastructure and mass transit, education. The president spoke about the veterinary school being developed here, the fossil park here at Rowan. And obviously, in addition, the universities work closely with people in your administration like Tim Sullivan and the New Jersey EDA on a host of projects. Overall, how would you assess your administration's record when it comes to addressing the needs of South Jersey?
I hope high. I mean, we made a commitment way back when, before I was elected, that we would spend a disproportionate amount of our time, energy, and resources on South Jersey, and I think we have. I'll let the folks in South Jersey, particularly my legislative friends, objectively assess that. But I mean, Lou and I have been talking about this for over 20 years. And I look at, by the way, offshore wind I mentioned as a disappointment. It's still out there as an opportunity, and it will come to fore. We extended the life of the nukes in one of the first steps we took, working with Steve Sweeney, as Mark knows, and Lou and others in the South. We're reimagining and rebuilding the entire Walter Rand Transportation Center in Camden. I think if Vic Karstafen were here, he would say we've done right by Camden. We tried to move the 76ers to Camden. That didn't quite work out, but you get an A for trying, I hope, an A for effort. We've done these micro transit loops, EDS and MEDS in particular. We've got a Vineland Atlantic City shuttle now, mostly for folks who work in Atlantic City. Atlantic City itself is something we've laid in heavily on. We've finally taken the first baby steps on light rail between here, Glassboro, and Camden at long last. We just announced we've got several of our strategic innovation centers are in the South, the avionics in Atlantic County, with the Coriell Institute in Camden. It hasn't been for lack of trying, let me put it that way. And it's not charity. This is earned. This is deserved. This is what South Jersey has earned and deserves. And Rowan, by the way, is a great example of this. So Rowan is not just a South Jersey gem. It's a Jersey gem. It's a gem, period. And I know that not just as governor. I've been around the world with these guys. Ollie and I bumped into each other 3 weeks ago in Woodland, California, in the Bay Area. Ollie was out pitching Rowan. I was out pitching Jersey. A lot of common ground there. We were with Plug and Play, which is one of the big accelerators who Ollie and Rowan are working with in one of the strategic innovation centers, I might add, here at Rowan. Tony Lohman and I have been around the world on our economic missions. And Rowan sells, if Jersey sells well around the world, Rowan sells well around the world. And this administration has been extraordinary to work with.
Thank you. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes and there are 2 quick questions. Hopefully we can go through them quickly. Wanted to ask you, as much as you were able to accomplish in your 2 terms, there's always more to do. As you prepare to leave office, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing New Jersey?
Well, I think the remaining challenge is the one that we've been battling, and we've been battling long before I got here, which is affordability. To make sure, and by the way, it's not the only challenge we've been battling, but that's, I'd say, is the top of the list. To make sure that at a minimum, this is for everybody, not just for some, a good value for money state. So I know we're not the low cost state to live in. I get that. But boy, I want to make sure I get a basket of stuff back in exchange for what I pay that works. So we put an enormous amount of effort into property tax relief, school funding to take it off the backs of the local property taxpayers, et cetera, on the affordability side, but also beefing up #1 public education system in America, extraordinary institutions of higher education, top 5 healthcare provision state in the nation. All of that for the good. Affordability continues to be, I think, at the top of the list. We mentioned energy earlier. Look at healthcare premiums, particularly with Washington turning their back on the subsidies for Obamacare. That's going to be another hop up. Tariffs are leading to inflation. So I'd say affordability is the top one. If you gave me 2, it would be the ongoing battle to shrink inequities, particularly across racial lines. Not entirely across racial lines, but overwhelmingly. Again, we've made a lot of progress. I mentioned infant and maternal health earlier with the First Lady, and these all-stars in the legislature made enormous progress. We don't have the gold medal yet. A lot more to go. The criminal justice system, we continue to pursue our clemency initiative, which is sort of a first in its kind in the nation. Honored to have led that. We'll continue to do that through our remaining days, but that's an unfinished story as well. Affordability and equity would be the 2.
Governor, at all RIPAC events, we conclude with this question. And in fact, the last time you were here back in 2019, I want to see whether you give the same answer. Okay. That's what it is. And that is, what do you know today that you wish you knew when you were their age? What do you know today that you wish you knew when you were an undergraduate in college?
Can you remind me what I said? 20?
Nah, I'll let you know privately.
I know I got into trouble here because I said something that I didn't say right about taxes, which I won't say again, by the way. My buddies here know what I'm talking about. I was much more diplomatic today. By the way, we've got 4 kids, 28, 26, 24, 22, one of whom is still in college. So this is not abstract. This question's not abstract. I'm not sure I've got a crisp answer, but I do think at your age, you have a feeling of not immediacy, but urgency. Like, I got to pick my major. I got to get this job. You fill in the blank. And I would say through ups and downs, by the way, it's never a straight line up. I don't know anybody who's had a straight line up. But this is a long, long, long life. And with artificial intelligence and scientific breakthroughs, the life is longer and not shorter. And view it that way. And know that in some cases, bless you, in some cases, you hit it big early on. I think this is accurate. Paul McCartney, who some of you may have never heard of, Paul McCartney was 26 when the Beatles broke up. And I believe that's accurate. Then at the other end of the spectrum, people hit it big in their 70s, in their 80s. And then there are some who sort of plod along and they do okay, and then pretty much they build up a great life story. And I would just say to you, be zen, be determined, always work hard, always be on the right side of the ethical question, be honest and straightforward. But the world's not going to end tomorrow. And don't forget that. Now, if there's an opportunity that hits you tomorrow and you feel good about it and it matches up, I spent a lot of time, forgive me for dropping the mic, not a mic drop, by the way. I spent a lot of time and advise you of this. If this is the situation, and the situation might be a choice of a class you could take, or a major, or a job, or which paper to write, or you fill in the blank. I have always counseled for myself, as well as for anyone else, this is what it requires to succeed, this is what I think I'm good at. How good is that match? And try to play into your strengths and get the stuff that matches well. It's one of the things we did. My wife and I spent over 2 years thinking through, frankly, far more from a policy than a politics angle. What did New Jersey need and what did we have to offer? And we felt, okay, the match was pretty good, enough so that we jumped in, and obviously we've been in office for the past 8 years. But I bet you I could say a lot in that vein, but that'd be one thing I would say.
And you're pretty close to what you said back in the earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Phil Murphy.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.